The sky above training station Cova 9 had never looked so wrong. It was not the color. It was not the clouds. It was the silence. Every cadet standing on the outer deck that morning felt it in their chest before they understood it with their minds. Something heavy was coming. Something that had no name yet. Something the galaxy had not warned them about. Cadet Ren Maddox stood at the edge of the deck with his hands behind his back and his eyes fixed on the dark shape moving through the upper atmosphere. It was big. Too big. The station's sensors had already started screaming 3 minutes ago, but Commander Drex had told everyone to stay calm and hold position. Ren was trying. He really was, but his heart was doing something that no amount of training had prepared him for. The shape was not a ship. It moved like a living thing. It rolled slowly as it fell, like a creature turning in its sleep. Its body was long and thick, wrapped in something that looked like dark, wet stone, but moved like skin. 6 massive limbs hung beneath it, each one longer than a fighter craft. Its head was low and wide, with no eyes that anyone could see, but 2 deep slits on the side of its skull that opened and closed, like it was breathing the thin air of the upper sky. Cadet Yella pressed close to Ren's shoulder. She was from a colony moon near the outer belt, and she had seen things most cadets had not. She had watched a war start once, from her bedroom window, when she was only 9 years old. She had that same look on her face now. That very specific look. The one that said she already knew this was going to cost something. "What is that?" she said. It was not really a question. Nobody answered. Commander Drex walked out onto the deck a second later. He was a tall man with gray at his temples and a scar across his left hand from a mission nobody talked about. He looked at the shape in the sky for exactly 4 seconds. Then he looked at his cadets. "That," he said, "is a Vorn." The word landed heavy. Even cadets who had never heard it before felt it. There was something in the sound of it that the human brain recognized as a warning. Ren had heard the word. Once. In a data file he was not supposed to access during his 2nd month of training. The file had been locked inside a restricted section of the station's archive. He had gotten in by accident, he always said, though nobody fully believed him. The file had been short, only 2 paragraphs. But those 2 paragraphs had stayed with him for 7 months. The Vorn were not soldiers. They were not weapons in the traditional sense. They were something older. Something the Galactic Council had used centuries ago when the older wars were too expensive to fight with ships and armies. They were living tests, sent into conflict zones, sent into training grounds, sent into places where beings needed to prove something about themselves. The Vorn did not follow orders. They followed instinct. And their instinct was to push every living thing it encountered to its absolute limit. Not to kill. Not exactly, but the limit between a Vorn's test and death was thin enough that the difference did not always matter. 3 cadets had already moved toward the emergency doors. Commander Drex did not stop them. He watched them go without judgment. Then he looked at the rest. 41 cadets remained on the deck. "The council sent it," Drex said. He did not look happy about it. "This is not a drill. This is not a scheduled exercise. Cova 9 has been selected for a field assessment. The Vorn will be on the station grounds within the next 11 minutes. Your job is not to defeat it. Your job is to survive contact and make a series of decisions under pressure. Everything you do will be recorded. Everything you do matters." Ren watched the shape drop lower through the clouds. He could see it more clearly now. The dark skin texture. The way it moved with purpose, but without hurry, like something that had never once been afraid of anything in its long life. "Why didn't they warn us?" Yella said under her breath. "Because warning changes behavior," Wren answered quietly. If you know something is coming, you prepare a performance. They want to see who you actually are. She looked at him. And who are you, Maddox? He did not answer that either. The alarm inside the station shifted from a warning tone to an active tone. The outer deck began to tremble slightly under their boots. The Vorn had entered the lower atmosphere. Its weight was pressing against the air around the station, and the station was feeling it. Metal groaned somewhere deep in the structure. A support beam somewhere in the east corridor shifted. Commander Drex gave the order to move indoors and take formation positions. Cadets scattered. Some went fast, some went calm, some went with the particular kind of focused movement that only people who have already accepted fear tend to show. Wren moved last. He took one more long look at the Vorn as it descended. At this distance, he could see the slits on the side of its head opening wide. Tasting the air. Tasting the station. Tasting the 41 beings inside it who were now officially its assignment. Something happened in that moment that Wren could not explain later, no matter how many times he tried. The Vorn's head turned, not toward the station in general, toward the deck specifically. Toward him specifically. The slits widened, stayed, wide, held in his direction for 3 full seconds before the creature angled its descent toward the north landing field. Wren felt no fear in that moment. He felt something much stranger. Something he could not name. A pull, almost. Like recognition. Like two things that had never met before somehow already knowing the shape of each other. He went inside. The doors sealed behind him with a sound like a lock turning on a vault. Somewhere below, on the north landing field, the ground shook once. Hard, the kind of shake that told every living creature inside the station the same thing at the same time without a single word being spoken. It had landed. The test had started. And nothing, not the training, not the files, not the commander's words, not the 7 months of preparation stacked inside every cadet's body, nothing had prepared any of them for what was about to happen next. The north corridor smelled like fear. Wren had never thought about what fear smelled like before that morning, but standing in the long hallway with 30 other cadets pressed against the walls, and their weapons drawn and their breathing all wrong, he understood it now. It was sharp, metallic, like something burning very slowly behind a closed door. Commander Drex moved through the corridor without making a sound. That alone told Wren everything. When a man with Drex's experience moved quietly, it was not because he was being careful. It was because noise felt dangerous, and his body already knew it before his mind caught up. The station had gone to secondary lighting. Red. Dim. The kind of light that made faces look like masks. Yellow was 2 positions ahead of Wren in the formation. Her shoulders were tight, but her hands were steady. He respected that about her. She was afraid the same as everyone else, but she kept her body from showing it. Most people could not do that. Most people let their fear leak out through their fingers and their jaw and the set of their spine. Yella held it in like it was something she could use later. The ground shook again. Not a hard shake this time. More of a slow pressure, like something very heavy taking 1 step. Then, another, then, stopping. It was close. Cadet Brun, a wide-shouldered boy from the inner colonies who had never once been quiet in 7 months of training, was completely silent. His eyes were moving fast, scanning the ceiling, the floor, the walls. Like he expected the Vorn to come through any surface at any moment. He was probably right to think that. The data file Wren had read said that Vorn did not use doors. He had thought that was a figure of speech. He was beginning to think it was not. Commander Drex stopped the formation with one raised fist. Everyone froze. The corridor stretched ahead of them toward the North Bay doors. Those doors were sealed. 3 levels of magnetic lock, according to the station layout. heavy enough to stop a standard military vehicle at full speed. Something hit those doors from the other side. The sound was not loud. That was the strange part. It was more like a deep push than a strike. A pressure applied through solid metal. The doors bent inward slightly. Just slightly, like the first breath of something very large pressing against a window. The magnetic locks held, but the light above the doors flickered once and went out. Drex looked back at the cadets. "Hold," he said. Nobody moved. The second push came 30 seconds later. The doors bent further. A seam appeared along the left edge, thin as a thread at first, then wider. Cold air poured through it from the landing field outside, and the cadets closest to the front pulled back instinctively. Ren stayed where he was. He was watching the seam, not with fear, with something closer to attention. Pure, focused attention. The way he watched a problem that had not shown him its full shape yet. The Vorn was not breaking the door because it was angry. It was not breaking the door because it needed to get through quickly. It was breaking the door at exactly the pace it wanted. Testing the resistance. Learning the material. Treating the station itself like the first layer of the assessment. The doors came apart on the third push. Not explosively. Not violently. They folded back along the seam like something being opened by patient hands. Cold air flooded the corridor. Behind the broken doors, in the pale gray light of the landing field, stood the Vorn. Up close, it was different than it had looked from the deck. Larger, yes, that was expected. But the thing that nobody's training had prepared them for was that it was not what it looked like. From the sky, it had seemed like a threat, like a weapon, like something designed purely to destroy. Standing in the open doorway, with its low, wide head tilted slightly, and its 6 limbs still, and its deep skin picking up the red corridor light, it looked like something else entirely. It looked old. Not old the way broken things are old the way mountains are old. Like something that had existed long enough to stop needing to prove what it was. Like something that remembered when the galaxy was younger and carried that memory in every part of its body. The slits on the side of its skull were open wide. It was reading the room. 3 cadets broke. They were not cowards. Ren never thought of them that way. They were simply honest about what their bodies were telling them, and their bodies were telling them to be somewhere else immediately. They turned and ran back down the corridor, and the sound of their boots was swallowed quickly by the red dark. 30 cadets remained. The Vorn moved into the corridor. Its 6 limbs found the walls and ceiling as naturally as a human finds a handrail on stairs. It did not rush. It moved the way something moves when it has never once been in a hurry, because hurry has never once helped it. 1 limb. Then, another. The walls creaked. The ceiling above it flexed. But it fit, barely, and it moved forward. Drex stood his ground. He raised one hand, open palm, toward the Vorn. A gesture of stillness, not aggression, not submission, just presence. The Vorn stopped. It looked at Drex for a long moment. The slits narrowed slightly. Then the creature turned its head slowly along the line of cadets, reading each of them in turn. Each cadet it looked at held still, but nearly every one of them showed something. A breath held too long. A step back that was caught halfway. A grip tightened too hard on a weapon that would do nothing against something this size. Then, the head stopped moving. It had found Ren. Ren did not step back. He did not tighten his grip. He did not hold his breath. He looked at the Vorn the same way he had looked at it from the deck. With that strange pull, that wordless sense of something shared between two things that had no language in common. The Vorn held its position for 5 full seconds. Then, it did something that nobody in the corridor had ever seen a Vorn do. It lowered its head. Not to attack. Not to charge. It lowered its head slowly and held it low, close to the floor, level with Ren's chest, a posture that every cadet in that corridor felt in their gut, even if none of them had a name for it. Yella turned and looked at Ren with an expression that was equal parts disbelief and something that might have been fear of a completely different kind. Drex had not moved, but his eyes had shifted to Ren too. Nobody spoke. The Vorn's head stayed low. The slits on its skull moved slowly, steadily, like something breathing in everything about this one particular human cadet and deciding, in the long, patient way that only very old things decide, that it had found exactly what it was looking for. Nobody in that corridor breathed for a long time. The Vorn's head stayed low. Its massive body filled the hallway from wall to wall, and the red light moved across its dark skin in slow waves as it breathed. The sound of its breathing was deep and rhythmic, like something heard through water, like a sound that belonged to a different kind of world. But it stayed still, completely still, its full attention pointed at one thing, and one thing only. Ren Maddox. Commander Drex took exactly one careful step forward. He kept his hand raised and his eyes on the creature. He was not afraid. Exactly. Drex was too experienced for simple fear, but Ren could see something working behind the commander's eyes. A calculation, a rapid sorting of everything he knew against everything he was currently seeing. The two did not match, and that bothered Drex more than the Vorn itself. "Maddox," Drex said. His voice was low and even. "Do not move." Ren had no intention of moving, not because he was following orders, because he genuinely did not feel the need to. Standing in front of this creature with its enormous head tilted toward him and its breathing steady and slow, he felt something that was deeply unreasonable given every fact of the situation. He felt calm, not the false calm of someone pushing fear down. Real calm. The kind that settles in the body when it decides, on some level below thought, that the thing in front of it is not a threat. His heart rate had actually dropped in the last 30 seconds. He noticed this the way you notice weather changing. Simply, without drama. The Vorn made a sound. It was not loud. It was not the kind of sound anyone expected from a creature that size. It was low and layered, like several tones pressed together, like a chord played on something that was not quite music. It moved through the floor into Ren's boots, and up through his legs, and into his chest, and sat there vibrating gently, like a question waiting for an answer. Ren did not know what it meant, but his body responded before he could think about it. He exhaled, long and slow, without deciding to. Like his lungs understood the sound even if his brain did not. The Vorn's slits widened. Yella, 2 positions to his left, grabbed his arm. Her grip was tight, not controlling, just connected, like she needed something solid in that moment, and Ren was the closest thing. "What are you doing?" she said. Still barely a whisper. "Nothing," he said honestly. "It looks like something." She was right. Whatever was happening between Ren and the Vorn, it looked like something even to the people watching it from the outside. Every cadet in the corridor could feel it. The air between Ren and the creature had a different quality than the rest of the hallway, like a conversation happening in a language made of posture and breath and silence. Drex lowered his hand slowly. He had made his calculation. He did not understand what was happening, but he had decided that intervening was more dangerous than watching. The commander had survived long enough to know that there are moments in the galaxy when you step back and let the thing unfold, because the thing unfolding has already decided its own direction, and the only question is whether you get in the way of it. The Vorn moved. Every cadet tensed at once. Weapons came up. Hands gripped harder. Bodies shifted weight backward. Every single reflex trained into them over 7 months fired at the same time. But the Vorn was not moving toward them. It was moving toward Ren. Slowly, one limb at a time. The ceiling groaned. The floor pressed down under the weight of it. It came forward with that same patient, unhurried certainty it had shown since the moment it entered the corridor. And Ren stood where he was and watched it come. When it was close enough that Ren could feel the heat of its body against his face, it stopped again. This close, the texture of its skin was extraordinary. Not stone, not quite. More like something that had been stone once, and had slowly, over a very long time, become something between stone and living tissue. Deep patterns ran through it, like cracks that had healed but left their shape behind. The dark color was not uniform either. There were deeper blacks and shadows of something almost dark green beneath the surface. The head came down until it was level with Ren's chest. The slits were inches from him now. He could feel the air move as they opened and closed. Smell something from the creature. Not unpleasant. Old. Like deep soil. Like something that had grown in darkness for a very long time and carried the dark with it. Ren lifted his hand. He heard Yella pull in a sharp breath. He heard someone behind him say something under their breath. He heard Drex make a sound that was not quite a word. A sound a man makes when he sees something happen that he cannot stop and is not sure he should. Ren placed his hand on the side of the Vorn's head. The skin was warm, warmer than he expected. It moved slightly under his palm, that deep rhythmic movement of its breathing running through the whole body. The creature went completely still at the contact. Absolutely still, like something pausing at a sound it had been waiting a long time to hear. Then, it made the sound again. That layered chord. Closer now, it was almost overwhelming. It moved through Ren's hand and up his arm and settled in his chest again, and this time, it did not feel like a question. It felt like an answer. Nobody in the corridor spoke for a long time after that. Eventually, Drex cleared his throat. He had his hands clasped behind his back, and his expression was the particular expression of a man assembling a new understanding of the world from pieces he did not previously know existed. "Pull back," he said to the cadets. "Quiet." Measured. Slowly. Everyone back to the main hall. Leave the north corridor clear. The cadets moved. Carefully. Quietly, like people backing away from something they respected too much to rush past. Yella was the last to move. She stopped beside Ren for a moment. She looked at his hand still resting on the Vorn's head. She looked at the Vorn. She looked at Ren. "You read something about these," she said. "In the archives, didn't you?" "Yes," he said. "Did it say anything about this?" He thought about the 2 paragraphs in the locked file, the short clinical language. The descriptions of assessments and pressure and limits, and the thin line between a Vorn's test and something permanent. "No," he said. "It did not say anything about this." She left. Ren stayed. The Vorn stayed with him. After a while, the creature lowered itself slowly to the corridor floor. All 6 limbs folded inward. Its body settled with a sound like a building finding its foundation. Its head rested close to Ren, and the breathing slowed further, and the deep warmth of it pressed gently against the air around them both. Somewhere in the station, Ren could hear cadets talking. He could hear the sound of Drex on a communication channel, speaking to someone in a clipped and serious voice. He could hear all the ordinary sounds of a world trying to process something it did not have a category for yet. In the corridor, it was quiet. Just a human, and the oldest kind of test the galaxy knew. And for reasons that neither of them could have explained, they were both, in that strange and unreasonable moment, completely at rest. The message from the Galactic Council arrived at 0400 hours. Drex read it alone in his office with the door sealed, and the lights at full, and a cold cup of something that had once been coffee sitting untouched beside his hand. He read it twice. Then he sat back in his chair and looked at the ceiling for a long time, in the way people look at ceilings when the floor has shifted under them and they need a moment to find level ground again. The message was not long. Council messages rarely were. The people who sent them had learned centuries ago that length gave people things to argue with. Short messages left less room for disagreement. This one was 6 lines. 6 lines that rearranged everything Drex thought he understood about what was happening inside his station. He called Yella to his office at 0430. He chose her because she was sharp, and because she had been standing closest to Ren in the corridor, and because her file said she was the kind of person who could receive difficult information without letting it change her face before she had fully processed it. He needed that right now. He needed someone who could hear a thing and hold it steady before deciding what to do with it. She came in and sat across from him without being asked, and looked at him with clear eyes and waited. Drex slid the message across the desk. She read it. He watched her face. It stayed exactly as still as he had hoped it would. Only her eyes moved, tracking the lines once, then a second time, then looking up at him with an expression that was careful and measured, and underneath it something that was absolutely not calm, but was doing an excellent job of pretending. "They didn't send it to test us," she said. "No," Drex said. "They sent it for him." "Yes." She set the message down on the desk and smoothed it once with her fingers, even though it did not need smoothing. A gesture of control, something to do with her hands while her mind worked. The message said this: the Vorn that had landed on Kova 9 was not a standard assessment unit. Standard assessment Vorn were younger, smaller, bred specifically for training evaluation. They were still enormous and still dangerous, but they operated within understood parameters. They had patterns, predictable behaviors, centuries of data behind them. The Vorn currently resting in the north corridor of Kova 9 was none of those things. It was one of 7 original Vorn, the ones that existed before the Council began the breeding program, before anyone had thought to standardize the process or control the outcomes. The original 7 had no parameters. They had no predictable behaviors. They had never once in their long existence done anything that anyone had successfully anticipated. They were also not owned by the Council. They had simply, at various points across the centuries, chosen to work alongside the Council when the reason seemed worth it to them. They could not be directed. They could not be assigned. They went where something pulled them, and they did what that pull asked of them, and no authority in the galaxy had ever successfully argued with that process. This one had pulled toward Kova 9 on its own. The Council had not sent it. It had come by itself, and the 6 lines at the end of the message, the ones that had made Drex stare at the ceiling for 20 minutes, said that in the recorded history of the original 7 Vorn, across centuries of activity and thousands of assessments and more contact events than the Council's archive could fully count, not one of them had ever lowered its head to a living being. Not one. Not once. Until last night. Yella looked at Drex for a long moment after she finished thinking through what this meant. "Does Ren know?" she said. "Not yet. Are you going to tell him?" Drex picked up the cold cup beside his hand, looked at it, put it back down without drinking. "I don't know yet what telling him would do," he said honestly. "I don't know if knowing would help him or change something that is currently working without interference. The Vorn chose him for a reason none of us understand. Introducing information into that situation feels like the kind of move that looks sensible and turns out to be a mistake. So we watch," she said. "We watch," he said. She stood to leave. At the door she stopped. "What does the Council want us to do with it?" she said. "With the Vorn, if it stays." Drex looked at the message one more time. "The Council's position," he said slowly, is that the situation should be monitored and reported, and that no action should be taken that might disrupt the current dynamic. He paused. They also said, in the last line, that they would very much appreciate being kept informed. He paused again. They said, please. Yella raised her eyebrows, the first crack in the careful face. The Galactic Council said, please. In writing, Drex confirmed. She left without another word, but he heard something that might have been a short, quiet laugh just before the door sealed behind her. In the North Corridor, Ren was already awake. He had not slept well. Not because of fear. Because the floor was hard, and the corridor was cold, and the Vorn's breathing, though steady and deep and oddly comfortable in its rhythm, was loud enough at close range to move through a body in ways that made deep sleep difficult. He had spent most of the night sitting with his back against the wall and his knees pulled up, and his eyes either on the creature or on the middle distance, thinking. The Vorn had not moved since it settled. 7 hours of complete stillness, except for the breathing. In those 7 hours, Ren had watched 3 different cadets come quietly to the broken doorway at the end of the corridor, and look in, and then leave, without saying anything. He had watched the station's automated cleaning unit attempt to enter the corridor from the east end, process the situation with its small mechanical sensors, and back away with what Ren could only describe as dignity. He had also watched the Vorn, not anxiously, not analytically, just watched it the way you watch something when you are trying to understand what it actually is underneath everything it appears to be. What he had decided, sitting in that cold corridor through the long quiet hours, was that the creature was not what any of them had thought. The files called it a test. The council called it an assessment tool. The cadets had called it a threat. But watching it breathe, slow and deep, with its ancient skin absorbing the dim light and its body settled into the floor with that mountain stillness, Ren had come to a different conclusion. It was lonely. He did not know how he knew that. He could not have defended it to anyone with logic or data, but somewhere in the hours of watching and the strange shared calm, and the sound that had moved through his chest like a question and then like an answer, he had felt it as clearly as he felt the cold floor under him. Something this old. Something that had outlasted empires and councils and wars and entire species. Something that had been used and directed and studied and written about in locked files and short clinical paragraphs. Something that had never, in all that time, been simply met. He leaned his head back against the wall. The Vorn's breathing moved through the floor, and Ren Maddox, cadet, 22 years old, from a small station near the edge of mapped space, sat in the dark with the oldest thing in the galaxy and felt, for reasons he could not explain to anyone, that he was exactly where he was supposed to be. The council's representative arrived on the 4th day. Nobody had been told she was coming. That was the first sign that this was not a routine visit. Routine visits came with 3 days of advance notice and a formal itinerary and a junior staff member sent ahead to check that everything was in acceptable order. This visit came with nothing. Just a ship that appeared in Cova 9's docking range at 0600, and a single woman who walked off it and into the station like she had been here before and knew exactly where everything was. Her name was Assessor Valen. She was older than Drex. Shorter. She moved with the particular economy of someone who had spent decades making decisions that mattered, and had learned to conserve every unnecessary motion for something that actually needed it. Her uniform was plain. No rank markers beyond the single silver line at her collar that meant Council Senior Division, the kind of rank that did not need decoration, because everyone who needed to recognize it already did. She went to Drex's office first. That meeting lasted 40 minutes. Ren did not know what was said in it, but he could read Drex's face when the commander came to find him afterward, and the face said that the 40 minutes had not been comfortable for anyone involved. Drex brought Assessor Valen to the corridor entrance, and stopped there. Valen looked in at the Vorn. She looked at Ren sitting against the wall with a half-eaten food pack beside him and his jacket pulled close against the cold. She looked at the Vorn again. Her expression did not change, but something behind her eyes shifted the way things shift when a long calculation finally resolves. She stepped into the corridor alone. Drex stayed at the entrance. Ren noticed the commander's hands were not clasped behind his back the way they usually were. They were at his sides. Ready. For what, Ren could not exactly say. But ready. Valen walked toward Ren at an even pace. The Vorn's slits opened as she approached. The creature did not lower its head. It did not make the layered sound. It simply watched her with a flatness that was not hostile, but was also not warm. The watching of something that had seen this kind of visitor before and had already made its assessment. Valen stopped a respectful distance from both of them. She looked at Ren with those resolving calculation eyes. "You have been here 4 days," she said. Not a question. "Yes," Ren said. "You have eaten in the corridor, slept in the corridor, attended your 2 required check-ins, and returned here each time." "Yes, why?" she said. Ren thought about it honestly. Because it did not seem right to leave. Valen was quiet for a moment. She looked at the Vorn again. The creature's breathing had not changed. Steady, deep, unbothered. "Do you know what this creature is?" she said. "Some of it," he said. "I read a file, 7 months ago. The restricted archive file. Yes, that file," she said carefully, "contains approximately 4% of what the Council actually knows about the original 7 Vorn." She paused. "We wrote it that way on purpose." Ren looked at her. "Why?" She sat down. Not on the floor the way Ren was sitting. She pulled a small equipment case from the corridor wall and used it as a seat and settled onto it with her hands on her knees and looked at Ren with the kind of directness that people use when they have decided to stop managing a situation and simply tell the truth of it. "Because the full information creates a problem," she said. "The full information changes how people behave around them. We discovered this early. The first time we published complete data on the original Vorn, every contact event afterward was contaminated. People came to them with agendas, with theories, with things they wanted to prove. The Vorn responded to that by withdrawing. 2 of the original 7 have not been seen in over 300 years. We believe they are alive. We do not know where." Ren absorbed this. "So you hid what they were," he said. "We simplified what they were," she said. "There is a difference, a small one, I will grant you, but a difference. What is the full information?" he said. Valen looked at him for a long moment, like she was measuring something, like she was deciding whether the measurement was right. "The original Vorn," she said, "are not assessment tools. They were never assessment tools. That is a function they took on voluntarily, centuries ago, because they found that younger species needed pressure to discover what they were capable of, and they were willing to provide that pressure." She stopped. "But that is not what they are. What they are is something the Council has 14 volumes of data on and still does not fully understand. What we know is this: they are the oldest living things in this part of the galaxy. They predate the Council by so long that the comparison is almost meaningless. They have seen every version of this galaxy that has existed in that time. Every war, every collapse, every rebuilding, every species that rose, and the ones that did not." She paused again. The corridor was very quiet. "They are also," she said, "the only things we have ever encountered that appear to be genuinely searching for something. Across centuries. Across every contact event, across every assessment, and every withdrawal, and every long silence between appearances. They are looking for something specific and we do not know what it is, and every time we have tried to study the question directly, they have moved away from us. Wren looked at the Vorn. Its ancient skin, the deep patterns running through it like old healed cracks, the slow warmth of it. Until now, he said. Until now, Valen said. The silence stretched between all three of them. Wren and Valen and the oldest thing in the local galaxy, breathing steadily on the floor of a training station corridor, like it had simply decided this was where it would be. "What does the Council want?" Wren said. He kept his voice even. But the question had an edge to it that he did not try to file down. He wanted her to hear the edge. Valen heard it. She did not react badly to it. "The Council," she said, "officially wants observation and reporting, and no disruption to the current dynamic." She looked at her hands on her knees. "Unofficially, there are people in the Council who want considerably more than that. People who believe that whatever this creature has found in you could be studied. Replicated, understood in a way that gives the Council some kind of leverage over the remaining original Vorn." Wren felt something cold move through him that had nothing to do with the temperature of the corridor. "And what do you want?" he said. Valen looked up at him. "I want," she said slowly, "to make sure that you understand what is coming before it arrives. Because it is coming. The moment I send my report, and I am required to send my report within 24 hours, certain people will begin moving toward this station with intentions that will not be good for you, or for that creature, or for whatever this thing between you actually is." Wren looked at her steadily. "You are warning me. I am informing you," she said carefully. "What you do with the information is your business." She stood, smoothed her plain uniform, looked one more time at the Vorn, which had watched the entire conversation with its slits half open and its breathing unchanged, with the patience of something that understood every word and had already decided how it felt about all of it. Then, she walked back toward the corridor entrance, where Drex was still standing with his hands at his sides. The Vorn watched her go. Then, its head turned back to Wren. The layered sound came again. Low. Moving through the floor. Moving through Wren's bones. And this time there was something in it that had not been there before. Something underneath the deep tones. Something that in a human voice would have sounded, unmistakably, like urgency. Wren looked at the broken door at the end of the corridor, at the cold gray light of the landing field beyond it, at the open sky above that. He looked at the Vorn. He thought about 14 volumes of data and 300 years of searching, and 2 of the original 7 that had not been seen since the Council made the mistake of studying them too directly. He thought about 24 hours. Then, he stood up. 24 hours was not very long. Wren understood this the moment he stood up from the corridor floor. He understood it the way you understand a tide. Not as an idea, but as a physical fact, pressing against the present moment with steady and increasing weight. 24 hours before Valen sent her report. 24 hours before certain people in the Council began moving. 24 hours before whatever this was became something that belonged to forces larger than itself. He looked at the Vorn. The creature was already standing. All 6 limbs unfolded from the floor with a slowness that had nothing of sleep in it. It had not been resting. It had been waiting. There was a difference, and the difference was in the quality of the movement, the rising of something that had already decided its next direction and was simply waiting for the right moment to begin moving in it. The slits on its skull were fully open. Wren grabbed his jacket from the floor, his food pack, the small kit he had brought to the corridor on the first night, more from habit than planning. He looked back down the corridor toward the main hall, toward the station, toward Drex and Yayla and 30 cadets who had stood their ground when the doors came apart, and toward 7 months of training, and the life he had been building carefully inside these walls. Then, he looked at the open doorway. The broken doors folded back. The cold gray landing field beyond. The sky above it, wide and dark, and full of the kind of distance that had no end. Yella appeared at the corridor entrance. She looked at him. She looked at the Vorn standing fully upright, filling the corridor with its ancient mass, its head turned toward the open door. She looked at the small kit in Ren's hand. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You already decided." "Yes," he said. She crossed her arms. Not in anger, in the way of someone holding themselves together while they process something difficult at speed. "You understand that leaving a council training station without authorization ends your cadetship," she said. "Yes. You understand that if the council sends people here and you are gone with it, they will classify you as a security concern." "Yes, you understand," she said, and her voice was steady, but something underneath it was not, "that we have no idea where it is going, or what is out there, or whether you will be able to communicate with anyone or come back." "Yes," he said. Then, more quietly, "I understand all of it." She looked at him for a long time. Then, "Why?" she said. He thought about the 14 volumes of data, the 2 original Vorn that had not been seen in 300 years because the council had tried to make them into something they could use. He thought about the corridor at night, cold and quiet, and the breathing moving through the floor, and the feeling that settled in him over 4 days of sitting with something that had outlasted empires and was still, after all of it, looking for something. Because the galaxy has been studying it for centuries, he said, locking files about it, writing clinical paragraphs about it, deciding what it is and what it is for, and how to get something from it. He paused, and nobody has ever just gone with it. Yella uncrossed her arms. She looked at the Vorn. The creature's head was turned toward her now. The slits moved slowly, that same reading quality it had shown in the corridor on the first day, moving along a line of cadets, looking at each one, except now it was only her, and the reading was slower, more deliberate. Then, the Vorn made the sound, not toward Ren this time, toward Yella. It was different than the sounds it had made before. Not the question, not the answer, not the urgency from last night. Something else, something that moved through the floor and up through Yella's boots, and settled in her chest, and she put one hand flat against her sternum, without realizing she was doing it. She stood very still for a long moment. Then she said, quietly, "That is extremely unfair." Ren looked at her. She looked back at him with an expression that was somewhere between exasperated and something that might have been the very early beginning of the same pull he had felt standing on the deck 4 days ago. "I am going to need 10 minutes, she said. Drex was in the landing field when they came out. He was standing in the cold morning air with his hands clasped behind his back again, which meant he had found his footing. He looked at Ren and at Yella beside him, and at the Vorn moving through the broken doorway behind them, its body filling the frame and then stepping free of it into the open air, with the ease of something returning to where it belonged. Drex looked at all of it for a long moment. Then he looked specifically at Ren. "The Council's report requirement is 24 hours, Ren said. "Valen told me." "I know what she told you," Drex said. "I was standing close enough." "Then you know why." Drex was quiet. Above them the sky was lightening, the dark pulling back at the edges to something gray, blue, and wide. The Vorn stood in the middle of the landing field, and its ancient skin caught the early light, and the patterns running through it looked different in daylight. Deeper, more complex, like the surface of something that had more to say than its outside suggested. "What I know," Drex said carefully, "is that in 40 years of service I have never once seen an original Vorn, and I have never once seen anyone do what you did in that corridor, and I have never once seen one of them make that sound toward a second person." He paused. "I also know that when very old things make choices, the reasons for those choices tend to be larger than anyone standing in the immediate moment can fully see." He reached into his jacket. He held out a small device. Standard long-range communicator. The kind that worked outside of standard relay networks. The kind that could reach people who wanted to be reached without going through council channels. Wren took it. "There are people," Drex said, "who are not the council. People who have spent a long time trying to understand the original Vorn from a respectful distance. People who have resources and knowledge, and who have been waiting for a very long time for exactly the kind of contact event that apparently just happened in my north corridor." He looked at the communicator in Wren's hand. "The frequency is already set." Wren looked at him. "You knew," Wren said, "before Valen came. You already knew what it was." Drex said nothing, but his eyes said enough. "The 3 cadets who left on the first day," Wren said slowly, "they did not leave because they were afraid. They left," Drex said quietly, "because they were not who it came for, and they were professional enough to recognize that and step back." A pause. "They are well. They are waiting in the East Wing." This was always a possibility we prepared for. We simply did not know which cadet, or whether it would happen at all. The full shape of it settled over Wren like something very large and very quiet. A training station at the edge of mapped space. A commander with a scar from a mission nobody talked about. A restricted archive file that a curious cadet accessed by accident. Or perhaps not quite by accident. 7 months of preparation for a specific cadet who did not yet know he was being prepared for anything at all. "You did not find me," Wren said. "You were looking for me." "We were looking for the right kind of person," Drex said. "We found you." He paused once more. The Vorn confirmed the choice. Yella looked between them. Processing. Her expression said she was filing this information and would have significant things to say about it later when there was time. The Vorn moved. It turned toward the open end of the landing field. The direction that led away from the station, away from roads and docking lanes and anything mapped and known and governed, toward the edge of things, toward the wide dark that had no end. It looked back once. At Wren, the slits opened fully. The layered sound came one more time. All the tones together. The question and the answer and the urgency and the something else that Wren had been trying to name since the first night in the corridor and had finally, standing in the cold early morning air of the landing field, found the word for. Home. Not a place. A direction. A movement toward something that had been missing for a very long time from a creature that had been looking across centuries without finding it. Until now. Wren looked at Yela. She had her bag over one shoulder and her jaw set and her eyes forward, and she was already walking. He followed. The Vorn moved with them. Not ahead. Not behind. Beside them, its 6 limbs carrying its ancient mass across the landing field at a pace that matched theirs without effort. Its warmth pressing against the cold morning air on both sides. Behind them, the station grew smaller. The broken north door. The red light still going inside. Drex standing at the edge of the field with his hands behind his back until they were far enough that Wren could not make out his expression anymore. Ahead was the sky. Ahead was the long dark and the old searching and the 14 volumes of data that had never managed to understand the thing they were studying, because understanding requires more than distance and documentation and clinical paragraphs in locked files. Sometimes it requires someone willing to simply go. The Vorn made a sound, low and warm and layered with everything it had learned to say across centuries of looking. And Ren Maddox, cadet, former cadet, 22 years old, from a small station near the edge of mapped space, walked forward into the wide unknown beside the oldest thing in the galaxy, and felt, in the deep and unreasonable way that only the truest things are ever felt, that the real test had never been about survival. It had been about this, about whether a human being, given every reason to stay in the safe and known and understood, would choose instead to walk toward something vast and ancient and alive. He had chosen. The sky opened above them. They walked into it together,